Good morning, everyone. We'll make a start because it is 8:45. It is lovely to welcome you all here this morning. My name is Rebecca Campbell and this is Alyssa Hinge. I'm sure some of you know already, and we make up part of the lower school maths team. So we're very excited this morning to talk to you about how you can support your child with their journey through maths in EYC. This morning we will cover a range of things. We'll be talking about what your children learn while they're at school and what they learn to do with maths. We'll focus a little bit on counting and the numbers up to 20. And we'll also look at number sense and why that is so important to the curriculum. We'll look at real life maths opportunities and how we do that in school, but also some tips on how to do that outside of school as well. And then finally, some top tips and games that they can be playing at home to help them with their learning. I'm going to hand over to Alyssa now, who's going to talk you through our EYC curriculum.
Good morning, everyone. So the maths curriculum is made up of domains, and maths is one of those domains. So on the left-hand side, they're the elements in the maths domain, and what we cover is number operations, shape, measure, and time. And these skills are progressive, so that's from little lions all the way up to reception. And we teach maths in early years through a mix of teacher-directed maths sessions and through planned provision opportunities as well. And the children will access in their play those skills, and they might have those skills in their play as well. And you might teachers, form teachers, would scaffold this in their play. And we would also, as teachers, be supporting that as well. And our vision as early years form teachers at Harrow is to create that depth through the curriculum that we're offering in their understanding of early years maths concepts. So these are the main elements in maths. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about noticing first of all. So we follow a maths is everywhere approach in early years, and this starts simply with asking the children to simply notice first. So this might be a skill that you haven't heard of before, but as form teachers, we think this is really, really important because it opens up that approach to telling children that there isn't just one right answer. And we start with practicing the skills so that tunes children to seeing that maths is everywhere. So you can see on these three pictures that we would use these pictures to ask children simply, what can you see? And you'd be trying to model that out loud because we know that children are naturally curious, and by talking about what you can see, you are saying your thoughts out loud and you're modelling it. So as the adult, you might say, look, I can see rocks on the beach in the middle picture. Okay, and then it has, and then you might start to have a look at the shapes of the stones in the middle picture as well, and you might be modelling that you can see long and that some are round, and simply asking the children, what do you see and how do you see it is really, really important. They're the two key questions that you would be asking the children. And by giving a running commentary on what you can see and how you see it, you are modelling for the children that skill of observing and noticing, and that comes first. And then at this point, the best thing to do is listen to your child's response. So they might not see it in a mathematical way, these pictures, but that's okay. They might notice the colours in the picture. That's okay. There isn't one right answer. It's that it's open and it's open-ended for that child. And then also it's about developing the skill of observing, looking for those details, and this will really help your child to make comparisons, solve problems, and have ideas of their own when they are older. And this is an activity that I really feel you could echo at home as well. Okay, so moving on to everyday maths. This is a huge focus as early years form teachers. And most forms in the early years at Harrow will use a form visual timetable to go through the children's timetable each day. And this really helps them to understand the concept of time. So, for example, like specialist lessons, they know, for example, on Monday they have splash play, or they know when lunchtime is, and the form teacher will go through that timetable with their form. We also teach the days of the week. So in nursery and reception, and also in pre-nursery, and even in Little Lions as well, we will go through the days of the week, so they're understanding the sequence of the days of the week. and also self-registration, so using 5 and 10 frames. So we've got an example of that on the table that you're welcome to have a look at the end of the presentation, and that's a huge focus. And we start that from little lines as well, and there's lots of progression. So we start with 5 frames in nursery and then 10 frames in reception, and they're able to see, we use their pictures for the child to be able to self-register themselves, and they understand how many children are here today, and who's not here, so it helps with the concept of one less and one more as well. And also, we've just recently started with form teacher calendars as well, so form calendars to support the concept of intervals and recorded time, and that really provides a deep understanding of the passing of time and intervals of time. So for example, a child might say it's their birthday in that week, and then you could mark on that child's birthday, and then you can see how many days it is until that child's birthday and talk about that as a class. And it's really visual as well for the child, because time is quite an abstract concept, but as you can see on the pictures, the children are invited to come and make the days on the calendar, so they can see how many days it is until that event. So it could possibly be a birthday or Songkran celebrations coming up, and it's really important, especially a time that we're talking about it every day, and this is why it's included in our everyday routines. Okay, so sorting is also another important skill, and this really helps children develop the skill of reasoning. And by asking children to compare and sort, it asks the children to be able to develop a range of thinking skills and build the foundations for later problem solving based on their own decisions rather than relying on someone else's criteria. So again, it would start like the noticing does, so asking the child, what can you see? So these are some key questions that we might ask. A child might naturally be sorting in their play, but we would also scaffold this through our own teaching as well, our teacher-director sessions. So we'd simply ask, what can you see? What is the same? What is different? How do you know? And how can we sort? And that child might start sorting by size. They might sort by colour, they might sort by shape, and again, there's not one right way to sort. It simply comes from the child, and then you, as form teachers, we're scaffolding the children, and they might see something that adults don't see, because often that happens, and children tell us they have really great ideas, and which are different to the adult. And just encouraging your child to sort objects however they want as well. So there is no correct way, no right or wrong. And again, I feel like this is something your child might do at home already, but something you can definitely encourage as well at home. Just some more pictures as well. Okay, so I'm just going to move you on to Rebecca now to talk about counting.
Thank you. So counting, there is lots of different ways that our children learn to count, and you'll see lots of this at home already. They'll be doing it in school and out of school just naturally. So our first way there is rote counting, being able to just list off the numbers, but not necessarily attaching them to an object or making any connection or links with those numbers. So for example, they might list the numbers 1 to 20, but they're not linking them to any object or any real life concept. Then there's the one-to-one correspondence, okay? They're counting as they're looking possibly at those objects. So when Alyssa was talking about sorting or observing, they might be able to count them, and they might be able to do that one-to-one counting. We put there subitizing in bold because that's a huge way that our children learn to count, okay? It's being able to see something and understand that that's 3. So we've brought some resources from early years for you to see this morning, and you'll see our 5 frames and our 10s frames, and we've got our 2 coloured stones. So for example, they might see 2 of the stones as yellow and 3 of the stones as white, and that, knowing that makes up 5. So with subitizing, we really encourage the children to show what they can see. And they might use their hands to do that, they might say it in English, but it's all about what they can see, and as Alyssa spoke about earlier, how they can see it. So you see the number 5, what can 5 be made up of? It can be made of 4, it can be made up of 1, it could also be made up of 3 and 2. And what that really focuses in is the depth in their understanding, and it links that rote counting of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but gives 5 meaning, gives it understanding to the children. And then the other one is the numeral meaning, so knowing what the numerals actually mean and developing their understanding of that. And then finally, thinking about what the last number in the total could be. What could that final number be? And building on those skills then helps them when they move into addition and subtraction as well. It is really important that the children do understand the number names, but also that they understand what those numbers mean. So what we encourage in our curriculum is depth and understanding. And we want the children, by the time they leave reception, to have awareness of the numbers up to 20. But our real focus is for the children to have a solid understanding of the numbers from 1 to 5 and 6 to 10 first, where they can fully understand what those numbers mean and make links to them. However, rote learning is important, and we know that our children can do rote learning at this age even further than the numbers to 20, and that's good and should be encouraged as well. But alongside that, we do want that depth in their understanding. So when it goes from the numbers 1 to 5, which they look at in nursery, and then in reception they move on to 6 to 10, we want them to really understand what those numbers are and make links. So using the self-registration, where they come in and they put it on a 5s frame, they're understanding that their friends and them make up numbers, giving meaning to that number. They might understand that the snacks on the plate show 2. So all of those links are made, and adults in early years provision are modelling that to the children all the time. So giving them that meaning and understanding of numbers. When it comes to numbers beyond 20, we want them to be aware of that too. And again, our registration form bill is brilliant for that, because the children are making links with those numbers. They might have 15 or 16 in their class, and they might have 15 children in, but one more children's come through the door, one more child. How many do we have now? So making those numbers relevant, it's all about them exploring those concepts, making play with those concepts inside their provision, but also making links to it, and showing that the maths isn't just in a maths lesson or isn't just in the classroom, but it's all around them in the world. So when they walk to the swimming pool, they might also be looking at numbers. They might be subitizing how many trees there are. I can see 3 trees. I can see 2 chairs and 1 chair. And they might be making those connections the whole time. And their teachers and the adults around them will be modelling that to them as well. I think for this age of our children, we want them to really explore. And you'll have seen on the previous slides, our HPL thinking skills are there. And I think what's really important is that our children are making those connections and exploring them and investigating them further. The next thing I want to talk about then is flexible thinking. And I think that really links to how we teach the children to count and our link of subitizing. So when we say that a child knows their numbers, we often mean that they're able to say the numbers in order, which is a really good starting point and something we do celebrate. However, when we want to create depth in the curriculum, we want to take it that much further. We want them to leave with a really solid understanding of number. So knowing what 5 actually means and understanding that 5 is always 5. So you might see 5 on a dice, and knowing that symbol on a dice means 5 is one thing, but also knowing that that 5 is the same as the 5 you show on your fingers, and you can show that like this is 5, or you could show it with 3 fingers and 2 fingers. And knowing that that amount is always the same. It's quite an abstract concept, so it's really important that we constantly model and show that to the children. Knowing that the 5 can also be the time of the day, that it can be linked to how many toys they're playing with. And that's really important when they're in provision, that then the staff are there to encourage those moments of exploration. So it can also be important at this stage to represent the number. So as well, you can see there that they've drawn the number 5 and knowing the numeral, but also they can pictorially draw it. So they might draw circles with 5 in them. They might also draw that beside the numeral. And it's making those connections to show that they are always linked. And no matter what, the number 5 is always the number 5. The number 8 is always the number 8. And I'm going to hand back to Alyssa, who's going to talk a little bit more in detail about maths is everywhere, but also numbers is everywhere.
Okay, so to echo what Rebecca was saying, it's really showing the children that maths is everywhere, and that's inside the form room, but also outside as well. And we plan as form teachers in early years lots of opportunities for children to engage with maths everywhere. So as Rebecca mentioned earlier, we focus a lot on subitizing. So practicing subitizing on tiny and huge objects. So it might be tiny grains of rice or like huge clouds in the sky. So when we're going outside, we're asking children to look everywhere. So not just on the ground, like it might be up high. Subitizing can be done in so many different contexts. So if we take, for example, a child on a shape hunt, you might ask the children to have a look at what shapes they can see in the environment. So they're making connections between the fact that shapes are everywhere and not just like concrete objects. And looking around to see what you and your child can find. So this is definitely something as well that you can encourage your child to do at home. For example, on car journeys or on holidays or at meal times, having a look in your house for shapes. Or subitizing with different objects in the house as well. So that's not counting, that's simply just seeing that, for example, on a dice they can see 4 or they can see 2. So it's about making those connections. This is what's really important about the fact that numbers are everywhere. It's that the children are making connections between the numbers we see in our environment. And again, this creates that depth and understanding for that child and showing children that maths is everywhere in our environment. And as you can see, there's so many pictures there to celebrate the fact that these children that we're teaching can see that there are lots of opportunities for maths, and we're giving the children opportunities for them to connect with maths in their environment. Okay, so along the same lines, the next slide is numbers in our environment. So we know that numbers are everywhere, and this gives us this amazing opportunity to extend everyday moments into incidental learning, and in turn it makes the learning purposeful and relevant to the children. So that's what's really important about numbers in our environment, and teaching children that maths is everywhere is so that it's purposeful for them, and we really want to provide those opportunities for children that are purposeful and meaningful, so they can really achieve in maths. For example, the numbers on an elevator. So when you're out and about as a family, you might see, a child might notice that there's numbers on the elevator. So you might bring their attention, or if they don't, you might bring their attention to numbers that you can see everywhere in the lift or on a sign, or if you're walking in the park, there might be numbers there, so you can have a look and explore that and talk about that with your child. And again, using that noticing technique of what do you see, how do you see it, and like Rebecca said, it's understanding that composition of number. That's what we really want children in the early years to understand. For example, 5 can be made up in lots of different ways, so 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1, and yes, it's great that they are recognising numerals, but before that, they really need to understand how numbers are made up, and we can really do that through offering these opportunities and opening up opportunities for children to see maths in the environment. And I think that's really, really important. And also that numbers go in order, so from small to big, but also the other way as well, that they can decrease as well. So yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move you on to Rebecca now, and she's going to talk about addition.
So when our children have that really deep understanding of number that's been built over time and very much part of every part of their day, we move on to addition. And that's where subitizing is so important. For the children to be able to know what makes up a number, it really helps with their understanding of addition. We use the CPA approach, which is the concrete resources. So, for example, on the screen you can see the teddies. Pictorial representation, so that example where there's the circles and they've done the dots inside, and also the abstract, and that's where we use the actual addition. So, for example, that top picture there where it says 4 plus 3, that would be our abstract alongside the pastoral, which is where they've drawn the numicon to help with that. So when they're adding, it's not just a faraway concept that's really hard to understand. They can draw things to support them, they can use objects to support their adding, and they can do this at any stage of the day. So Earlier we talked about that form bill when they come in and they're adding, and we've seen that in practice. When the children are coming into the classroom, they can do that adding on of one more, which is really important. Counting real-life objects is a great way for children to practice these skills, and we want them to have lots of opportunities throughout the day to be able to practice their addition skills. And they can do that also at home with those concrete resources. You'll probably have already seen a lot of your children getting out their toys, adding them together, putting them up, and already naturally doing that because they're doing that while they're in school as well. But also it is important that they have other ways to support them. So that can be through drawing pictures and helping understanding those addition problems. I put up this example here from a child in pre-nursery, and she used our 5 frames, which we've brought to show you today. And she was doing some adding, and actually this was where she was kind of problem solving with her adding. She had her 5 frames. She could see in that first picture that she'd filled it with 3 of the stones. And on the other 5 frame, she had 2 stones. And you could see as she was working through this problem, she was problem solving. She knew they went together, but she wasn't necessarily sure how. And then eventually, she did solve the problem of adding, and she was able to lift that up and move it over and make the 5. She ended up covering over one of the 1. At a very young age, she was problem solving and making understanding of addition, and this was done with no adult support. They were just watching and supporting her as she worked through the problem herself in her head, which was really amazing to see at such a young age. And it is really important as adults, we naturally always want to jump in and help, but giving that time for children to just explore and just look through the maths, work it out for themselves. And it's okay if they don't get the answer straight away. I think that's what's really important. The answer is not always the most important thing. It's the journey and the learning that they take to get there. So those opportunities to just step back and allow them to problem solve, allow them to work it out in their head is really, really important. It's very similar with subtraction. We want to give them that time to do it, but again, and you'll hear me and Alyssa say this a lot, making it relevant to the children, making it exciting. We want them to have a love and a passion for maths, so it's making sure that it's something that's going to interest them. So you can teach them subtraction through songs. It can be done with food. If I have 3 cakes and I give 2 to your friend, how many cakes are we going to have left? It can be using resources. It can be done in PE. It can be done at any stage of the day. The children are doing that maths and it's linking to their learning. So again, it's really important about using those everyday objects, those toys that they're playing with, different times of the day, dinner time, snack time, and using those opportunities to have maths as well in their day. Number bonds as well follows on from that, and just showing, we've put a range of pictures here to just show the range of ways that you can represent number bonds. It's really important that when they begin that we really focus on those numbers 1 to 5 and understanding those really well, and they'll do a huge focus of that in nursery and the other year groups, but then when they get to reception, we extend that further to numbers up to 10. So the children represent that in loads of ways, and we've brought a few to show you today. So we've brought the numericon. It might be with their building blocks. They also might have teddies that are in numeral form, and it's making all those links and understanding how numbers are formed. And Alyssa spoke earlier about that they're formed in different ways. So 6 is made up of 2 and 4, of 3 and 3, of 6 ones, and understanding that it can be shown in lots of ways. And often when you go into a classroom, you'll see all the children having their hands and being able to actually representing numbers in very different ways. And it's brilliant to encourage that, to have that moment where they can see that they've come up with the right answer, but so has their friend. And there's lots of different ways to represent numbers. Alyssa's now going to talk to you a little bit more about rhymes and songs and how we use that to support maths learning as well.
Okay, so like Rebecca already mentioned, songs are really great, and rhymes for really introducing number to children. So in nursery, for example, we start this in term 1, and we focus on that because it really helps them to visualise numbers and how to represent them, so a different way through actions and through singing. So I've put on a few examples of nursery rhymes that are really great for representing different concepts. So it could be one more and one less, or it could just simply be cardinal counting. So that's understanding that there's an ordinal counting. So cardinal is knowing that the final number in that set represents that whole amount, that total amount, but also ordinal counting, like you can see for 5 little speckled frogs, that each frog represents a number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we do this through our teacher-led sessions. So we would like to invite children up to the front to be those 5 speckled frogs and act it out so they can visually see that each time the number gets smaller. And you can also do that for one more as well. And it really creates that deep understanding for the children, because it's concrete and they can see that taking away and that adding as well. And just also songs really help children to remember numbers as well. And we know how much children love to sing, and especially nursery and carrying on as well into reception, this is something that we really focus on. And as well as using the children as to represent the numbers as well, we might invite the children to use props for children to act out as well. And a lot of children like to do this in their play as well. So once we've done that with the whole class and done it through a teacher-directed session, the children actually like to do it themselves and act it out with their friends, which is great and really provides just more opportunities for them to practice these skills and really understand their numbers to 5 and then to 10 and then to 20. It's just a really fun way to support their understanding of number. Okay, so I'm going to move on to talk about comparing. So this is another really important skill, which is a skill that you can do from the noticing, which we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. And it's about an important skill that helps children to practically understand that those real life objects in everyday situations. Okay, so naturally you see this in provision a lot. And like Rebecca said before, like meal times are a really good opportunity to do this. For example, you might compare the snack on the child's plate that they've got. So it's snack time. As form teachers, we might ask the children, what do you see? And they might say, oh, I see 2 pieces of fruit and 1 cupcake. And then if they eat the cupcake, oh, how many do you have now? Okay, so it's really comparing and contrasting and asking children to compare themselves as well to the objects and people. So this is really good for size when we're teaching compare themselves to the height of the door. And again, you could do this at home. There's lots of opportunities to do that. And you might, for example, create a chart at home with everybody's heights, so their height compared to mum's height or dad's height or their brother's height or their sister's height, and really creating that opportunity for them to talk about the fact that they are smaller than their brother or bigger than their brother, or shorter or taller. And again, yes, you can do that with short and long as well. So for example, there's a picture on the left there. We're teaching long, longer and longest, and we provide concrete objects for them to be able to measure different objects in the form room. And again, these are concrete objects. They're everyday objects that the children see in their classroom. So these opportunities happen all the time. For example, this week in nursery, we're teaching weight. And we taught it through a teacher-directed session first, and we talked about how when something's really heavy, that makes your body go down. It forces your body down. If it's heavy and it's light, it's easy to carry. And actually, the children then really enjoyed the session, so they were doing that through their play and showing me objects in the classroom that were heavy, comparing objects that were heavy against objects that were light. And these moments happen all the time naturally in play, and it's really great when you see those skills from a teacher-directed session, then through their provision, they're practicing that skill as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to talking about estimating. So estimating is really important in early years because it helps build that number sense. So everything we're talking about today creates, like we've said, that depth and understanding, but also creating that number sense, and that there's a playfulness with numbers. We want children to have fun when they're learning numbers. You know, we don't want them to be put off for life with maths. It's showing them that maths is everywhere approach and that everyone can achieve. And estimations is great for that. It helps to build that number sense, and that it doesn't matter if your answer is not always accurate. Okay, and this is a skill that we use as adults now. Okay, you often say, okay, if you need so many packets of crisps, you might say, oh, okay, I'm going to take maybe 5 with me today. You're making an estimation, and that happens naturally all the time in life. So this is a skill to really build children to understand that it's okay not to get the right number, but making a guess is important. So, for example, in nursery, we've recently introduced a Play-Doh station, which creates opportunities for the children to make those purposeful estimations. So they're learning how to make Play-Doh on their own. So they're having to make estimations about how many cups of flour they need to then add the water. How many cups of water do you need to then mix the Play-Doh together to make the Play-Doh? So they've been doing it themselves. It's purposeful. The aim is to make Play-Doh, but they're talking about numbers in a playful way, and they're making estimations about how much flour they will need. Okay, so they might say, I need 2 cups of flour, or I might need 3, I think, to mix it together and make a handful of Play-Doh. So it's really encouraging children to make those guesses, which is really, really important, and again is something that you can support at home as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to time. I mentioned this at the beginning of the presentation when we talked about those everyday routines. So to understand the concepts of time, children need to hear it and experience it many, many times. Like I said before, it's an abstract concept. So we want children to really have that deep understanding of it. So in order for them to have that deep understanding of it, as form teachers and as parents as well, as much as we can at home and at school, talk about it, the better. So in terms of time, we talked about in those everyday routines, we go through the visual timetable. So each form teacher will have pictures of how their day will start, so from beginning to end. And we will go through with the child what lessons they have each day. And they will also be able to link that to the days of the week. So like I said before, I used the example that, for example, my children now can tell me on Monday we have splash play. On Wednesday we have PE. And it's really important that they're making those connections with time. And the days of the week. In nursery, we started it right from the beginning of term 1, and we do it every single day, the days of the week song, and they absolutely love it. And we also have, I think it was on the other page when we showed the everyday routines, but we have laminated cards with the days of the week on, and my children love, we'll do it together as a form. Okay, can anyone tell me what day it is today? And they would tell us what day it is, and then I'd invite a child to come and select the day of the week and put it on our chart, and then we'd discuss about what we would have today on that day, Monday, splash play, etc., etc. And also another important resource for showing the understanding of time is the calendars which we've introduced, and they are such a positive way to show children those intervals and recorded time. So intervals of time, like I said before, if it's a child's birthday in their form, then you can invite the child to come and mark on, maybe they draw a picture of a balloon for their birthday, and then as a class you would count and see how many days it is until that child's birthday, and they really, really enjoy it. They can also come and cross off. They've got cross-curricular links to mark making and writing as well, because you invite them to come and cross off. Also big celebrations like World Book Day. A child in my class drew a picture of a book, and then we had a look at how many days it was until World Book Day. So it's something that really helps them visually to see that time passes, and that is very abstract if you're just talking to your child about it. But this actually is a way for them to visually see that. So you've got that concrete resource for children to actually see that time passes, but also that we can record time as well. I think that's everything about time. So we're going to move on to shapes now. So again, it links to that maths is everywhere approach. So I think I mentioned it before about going outside, seeing that shapes are everywhere, and that's what we really, as form teachers, encourage that children or ask children to take notice of when they're outside playing. They might come and tell us, I can see a square, or I can see a triangle. I'm asking children, well, how do you know it's a square? How do you know it's a triangle? And you're looking for that vocabulary of, I know it's a triangle because I can see that there's 3 sides or there's 3 corners. And that's what we're really aiming children to get. That's the aim of what we're trying to get children to get to have that deep understanding of shapes. So just like numbers, we create those opportunities to explore shape in everyday life context. So you can see from the pictures, we're going on a shape hunt. I always tell my form, we're shape detectives. We're going out on a shape detective hunt today, and they just love to find all the shapes everywhere, in the outdoor environment, in the indoor environment. And also creating, again, those cross-curricular links. We like to link it with art as well, and creating artwork using shapes as well, and that's great for pattern. And this provides opportunities to talk about them, name them. That's really important that they know the shape names, 2D, and then moving on into reception 3D, and then year 1 as well. But it's also just pointing out shapes that are 2D and shapes that are 3D, and why is it, and how do they know? So it's talking about with the child that 2D, it's flat, but 3D, you can see it all the way around, because that's often a misconception sometimes. And it's asking them how they know. That's what's really important. Just like we do with number, we can use the exact same questioning as we do for number, as we for shape as well. So we can ask them simply, what do you see? How do you see it? And asking them to reason. So I know it's a square because it's not round. So if a child was to say that to me, I'd know that child has a really deep understanding of what a square is, because a square isn't round. So you're looking and modelling that vocabulary all the time. Okay, so we're going to move on nicely to patterns, and I think Rebecca's going to do this one.
So shape flows into pattern really nicely, and it links with what Alyssa spoke about earlier. It's all about that noticing and observing. And I think what you'll find from a lot of what we've talked about, it's all about the talking, the language, having those discussions, those conversations, and the children will have those with adults, but then also they'll take that into their own play and have those conversations, kind of modelling what they see the adults in their classroom doing. So that's really important. Again, it's something they can do everywhere. So we encourage the children to look for patterns everywhere. When they're not necessarily seeing it themselves, we can point it out for them, show them the patterns, talk about them. What do you see? How do you see it? What are the colours? All of those conversations. And we teach that in many different ways. We teach it in many different areas of school, when they're out and about, when they're outdoors in their play, when they're in the classroom, but through different subjects. And Alyssa mentioned this earlier as well. This is a really lovely one to teach through art as well, and let the children explore patterns while linking it to the art curriculum as well. Oh, I'll just go back actually. One as well is they can compare, and I think that's a really great chance as well for them to talk about comparisons in patterns and shapes as well. Another thing to share is prepositional language. It's something we as adults just know, but actually the concept to a child is very difficult to understand. They're just words. They don't mean anything. So it's really important that we give those words meaning, and the language is really important to share. So showing the children, for example, the teddy in the box. The teddy is inside the box. The teddy is beside the box. The teddy has moved behind the box. And actually showing them what that is, I think, is a really important thing. And they can do that again and explore those words through their play and explore that in their lessons as well. The language here is really, really important, okay? And it's constantly using that language, and the staff in school model that to the children continuously so that they can understand the concept and also begin to use that language themselves. Games. We're going to move on now to kind of some things that the children do in school, but also really great ways to bring in maths at home as well. Maths can be taught in a range of different ways, and games is an excellent way to do that. Through games, they can understand number more. So, for example, if you look at the dominoes or the snakes and ladders chart, but they can also do their comparing and their noticing. You're playing Jenga, you can have it getting bigger or smaller. You could look at the shape of the Jenga pieces. There's so much conversation about maths that you can get from different games. You can look at patterns when you look at the 4 in a row game there. Outdoors, and we've got some examples that we've brought as well to show you. They can be playing these games and noticing that maths is part of every game. There's always something, pattern, shape, number. I think most board games will link in some way to number, so it's a really great way to help the children explore and investigate, and that's what is really important at this stage for them to do. And again, it's making those real life links what is maths, why is it important, how does it link to me, a child. So that the games is a really great way to share that with the children. And of course, it's very fun for them. Vocabulary. Throughout everything that we do, language is the most important. It's about the discussion, about the talking, having the time to share their ideas. And it's important to mention that that can be done in English or Thai or their home language. We obviously are modelling in English, but we give the children also an opportunity to explain their understanding in their home language too, whilst also the adults modelling the English to them. It's fundamental in maths to talk. They have to talk to learn about it, and that is in early years, but also the whole way through their life at school. It's so important that they're having those conversations, and the staff at school encourage that, and we encourage you to do that at home with the children too, and that can be in whichever language. It's just about having the opportunity to discuss, to notice, to observe what they can see and how it links to maths. And that's why the real life examples are so important, because it can be done in and out of school. One of the final things that we want to talk to you about is mindset. And growth mindset is a huge thing. We want our children to know that they're on a learning journey. Mistakes are encouraged. And again, that's in EYC, all through pre-prep and beyond. Mistakes is how we learn. Getting things wrong is okay. And actually, it's necessary. And when we talk about estimating or guessing and improving, those mistakes are really important. We want every child to have a love and a passion for maths, and we want them to be able to take risks with their learning. So mistakes are a great thing. The right answer or the answer isn't the most important thing, and that's really important for our children to understand. It's not that they can't do it, it's that they're working on it. They're on their learning journey, and I think that's a really important thing that we definitely teach and show in school. It's through everything we do, but also that we want to encourage at home. They're not getting things wrong, they're just learning, they're just exploring the new ideas. So it's a really good thing that we like to stress to our children and make sure that they understand. We want them to be risk takers with their learning. We want them to know that they're on a journey and that the mistakes are a really great thing. Everyone can achieve in maths, and our curriculum at Harrow Bangkok is to ensure that every child can achieve. So that starts right at the very beginning, the most important thing, with their mindset as well, and their understanding that they can achieve too. We've put up as well our survey, and we'd love to hear feedback and open it up for questions. But also we have brought some resources to show you some of the things we do. So please come, have a look, have a little play with them. And if you have any questions for me and Alyssa, we are here to answer. But I just want to say a huge thank you for coming this morning. It's been lovely to share this with you. And we'll be around now if you have any questions for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.